So good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have everyone here. I hope you had a restful weekend and you're ready to dive into the second week of the Elul challenge. And we are going to be continuing our study of the Likutei Moharan, and specifically lesson 282, which is the lesson we began on Friday. This lesson is divided into two major parts, and we went over the first major part of the lesson, which is the first two sections. There are 6 sections all told. The first 2 sections were taught by Rabbi Nachman of Breslov on Shmini Atzeret, 1807. He then left his community to go to Lvov, or Lemberg, as it was called at that time. As I mentioned in the last session, 2 of his disciples, including Reb Nosson, his great disciple who wrote down a lot of his works, they followed him because they were very concerned that they were going to be out of the Rebbe's presence for some time. They caught up with him somewhere outside of Lemberg, Lvov, and they asked him to teach them Torah. And he completed sections 3 through 6 of this lesson. So you're going to see that there's a slight change in tone between what we studied on Friday and what we studied, what we're going to study today, because they really were transmitted in 2 separate situations. Okay, now they do connect together, but again, they happened under 2 different situations and were then brought together when Rabbi Nosson collected all of the works to publish them in Likutei Moharan, all of the teachings. So just a brief review of what the first 2 sections of this lesson, which is seminal to Breslover ideology and theology, is all about. The first is that we must judge everyone favorably. We must find within each and every person that little bit of good. And it doesn't matter how far we have to go back to do it, or how strongly we have to search, how deep we have to dig. We must find in every person a little bit of good, because by doing that, we judge everyone favorably, which is what Pirkei Avot, the teachings of our ancestors, tells us, right? That you should get a teacher, acquire a friend, and judge all people favorably. And that's how Rabbi Nachman understands judging all people favorably, that you search and search and search until you find a little bit of good. And he gets this from the verse of the Psalm, which is Psalm 37, verse 10, right? Where it says, right, the od me'at, right? The ein rasha, that in a little bit of good, there is no evil. This is his way of translating and interpreting the verse, because the verse really, on its most face level, on its most basic level, means in a little bit of time, the evil will be no more, right? Which is why you shouldn't envy evil people, because in a little bit of time, that will pass and the evil won't be there anymore. They will disappear. They will be gone. He's taking this to mean that no, on a deeper level, it means you have to search for that little bit of good in everyone, because once you find it, that person can no longer be considered evil. And so you therefore take them from column A, which is they're evil and they're going to be judged, and right, and you move them into column B, which puts them on the path of tshuva, which puts them on the path of repentance. Okay. And then not only do you have to do this to others, but you must also do it to yourself. You have to dig and search within yourself to find that little bit of good. Because if you don't, you will give in to despair. You will lose all sense of joy, all sense of purpose, all sense of connection, and you will just wither and die spiritually. So you have to be able to not only judge others fairly, you have to find the strength to judge yourself fairly as well. This is the second section of the lesson. And he says that this is how people sing, quote unquote, because the phrase in Psalm 146 is Azamra lelohai be'odi. I will sing to God with that ode, with that little bit, that ode me'at. He connects the two verses through that Hebrew word ode, right? And that this is how you sing, and that this is how music is made. Music is made when we sift out the bad ruach, the bad air, the bad energy from the good energy, and then we weave all of the good ruach together. So you judge yourself favorably, you dig down deep inside, you find that od me'at, that little bit of good, and then you find another one and another one and another one, and you build and you build and you build, and you weave them together into a melody. And that's what our prayer is. That's what song is. That's what music is. And that if you can't do that, then you're unable to pray. And that you'll just be mute. You won't be able to pray. You won't be able to lift your voice and make physical melody if you can't weave together the spiritual melody that comes from weaving together all of your good points because you've sifted them out from the bad. You've sifted out the good ruach from the bad ruach, right? And it's a beautiful analogy because that's how he says you make physical music. You try to find the sweet spot, the spot that is perfect, the spot that is good. And until you find it, you keep searching and searching, and then you find it, and you find it again and again and again and again on an instrument, and then you make a melody. And it's the same thing internally, okay? That's the first two sections, the first part of this lesson. And if you go to Likutei Moharan, which says 282, 213, it should be at the top of the first, second, third, the fourth page. You'll see a note that Rabbi Nachman, okay, has put after this teaching, right? So these next two verses that we're going to look over, this is Reb Nachman, right? Rabbi Nachman's great disciple. He's adding just a little comment at the end of this section of the lesson, okay? He's saying, Rabbi Nachman of blessed memory cautioned us to live by this teaching, for it is a major foundation for anyone who wishes to draw close to God, okay? Now, that's going to be our next lesson after we finish up this. Hitbodedut, drawing close to God. But you have to have this as your foundation if you're ever going to be able to accomplish drawing close to God. You have to live by the dictum of judging others fairly and favorably, judging others favorably, finding that little bit of good, and also judging yourself favorably and finding that little bit of good. Because you're never going to draw close to God if you don't. That's why this is something that you just have to always caution yourself about, that you're living by it. Because Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Nachman acknowledge this is the most difficult thing human beings are asked to do, to judge others favorably and to judge themselves favorably. So he says, right, that anyone who wishes to draw close to God and not lose his eternal reward completely, God forbid, right? If you can internalize this teaching, then you're on the right path, okay? In most cases where people are far from God, the main reason for this is sadness and depression. They fall into depression because they see for themselves the great harm they have caused through their actions. Each person commensurate with what he himself knows of his heart's affliction and his anguish, right? We fail to draw close to God because we deem ourselves unworthy. We don't even wait to hear what God has to say. We deem ourselves unworthy. We say, look at the harm I've caused. Look at what my actions have done. I'm unworthy, and we sink into this deep pit. And as a result, we cannot get ourselves out of it, and we cannot connect to God, okay? So we just fall into this depression, okay? Due to this, right, they become depressed, and most of them despair of themselves completely. As a result, they pray without any concentration and do not even do what they are still capable of, right? Because we're just so mired in all the wrong we've caused in the world and everything bad that our actions have done that we can't even do anything, and we can't even, right, do the little bit that we're even still able to do just on the most low and basic level. right? Because all we do is think about how bad we are and how our actions have hurt others and hurt this world, and then ultimately it ends up hurting us. So that's why Rabbi Nachman says you gotta dig and you gotta find that little bit of good so you can start the process of reconnecting to divinity, right? Reb Nosson goes on, thus a person has to be very sagacious in this matter. For although all his depressions are due to the evil deeds he has indeed committed, still that he fell into depression and that sadness and melancholy descend upon him because of this is nothing but the work of the evil one. And remember I said last week, evil one is called Baal Devar, master of words or master of things, right? That's what the Breslovers are translating into English as evil one, right? That, you know, this is the work of the master of words, the master of things, right? And therefore we get discouraged, right? So this discourages those in order to defeat them completely, God forbid. One must therefore be very resolved to live by this teaching, to each time search and seek within himself a little bit of good and good points, etc., as explained above. Through this, he will revive himself and bring himself joy, and he will still look forward to God's help. He will be able to pray and sing and give praise to God in the aspect of, I will sing to God with the little bit I have, Azamara lelohai be'odi, as explained above. And because of this, he will merit to genuinely return to God, as explained above. So this is the core aspect of being able to reconnect to God, being able to make tshuva. If you can't do this for yourself and for others, you are going to have such an upward battle making tshuva and connecting with divinity, right? This, though, if you espouse this, right, this will then give you joy. This will help give you a foundation of joy on which to build so that you can connect to divinity. Not just yourself, but by doing it for others, you can help others connect as well. Because when you find the good in someone else, then they no longer cease to be, they no longer cease to be completely evil. And therefore you can relate to them differently. And we explained last time, this does not mean you excuse their evil deeds, right? Or that you're calling the evil person good. No. They still did horrible things, right? And none of those deeds that they did can be considered good. Yet, even with all that, here is this little piece of them that is not evil, right? Because at some point in their lives, they did something worthy of it being called good, right? And again, you can see how challenging what they're asking us to do, right? What this theology, this ideology is asking us to do. So now let's go on. Now, what is the outcome of all of this? So now we start again. Now, please, as we go on and read this lesson, I did not pick this lesson in any way or, because of any self-serving or congratulatory nature, as you will see. So he begins again, V'da, okay? This is right, V'da. Know this, that someone who is capable of making these melodies, gathering the good points that are to be found in each Jew, even a Jewish sinner, as explained above, can lead the communal prayers. Okay? Can lead the communal prayers. For one who leads the communal prayers is called the messenger of the people. He must be sent by all the people. In other words, he must gather every good point that is to be found in each of the congregants. All these good points are merged in him, so that when he stands up to pray, it is with all this good. And this is the meaning of messenger of the people. Thus, he must have within him this exalted aspect, as a result of which all the points are drawn to him and become merged within him. Okay? So that means you have to find the good in others, you have to find the good in yourself, and if you want the ability to actually lead the congregation in prayer, you then have to expand it to be able to find the good in each and every one of the people that are sitting in your sanctuary when you stand up on the bima to lead the prayers, because you are their messenger And if you are their messenger, that means you are able to see in everyone a little bit of good and draw all of that together. And that's what makes your melody, the spiritual melody you get by finding the good in everyone seated in the sanctuary. Yes, Ari.
I feel as if this is a reflection in order to take away the pleasure of lashing oneself for something they've done wrong. And in this, I find that there is a theological position that is quite different from other theological positions where if you do commit a sin, you're expected to know there's an ascetic into it. And this is saying, don't take pleasure lashing yourself. Focus on, because when you do, you are actually closing yourself off to what it is that God is actually wanting to. God wants, in Tshuva, it's about turning to the right spot, not about punishing yourself. So if you can turn to the right way of living through reflections of goodness and joy and all the things that we've learned in the past, that's a way to pave yourself forward.
Well, I think you're right. I think, again, Rabbi Nachman is saying that at the core of your experience in the Jewish tradition, there must be this core of joy. The Jewish tradition is not calling us to beat our breasts to such an extent that we cut ourselves off from joy and gladness and happiness, right? Because God calls us to joy, not to pain and to suffering. And that pain and suffering, even though we believe it may be beneficial, is actually harmful and hurtful, just for what you said, not being able to turn, right? And it's this whole idea that we have to say that we are going to have this foundation of joy. We're going to ensure that other people have this foundation of joy, right? We have to help ourselves find it. We have to help others find it. And I think, yeah, it's that idea of not, of just what you said, not making pain and misery. Right.
Joy, like it's really taking on the perversion of finding pleasure and joy in hurting
oneself. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, taking pleasure. Yes. Of Marnie. Yes, we'll go around. Yeah.
With Jewish guilt.
Well, I would. Yeah. No. Well, I mean, honestly, I would have to say that Rabbi Nachman is actually saying that Jewish guilt taken to extremes is harmful, right? I mean, guilt has its place. We do have to acknowledge the evil we do in the world. This is not, because remember, there are many notes in the Likutei Moharan that this is not meant in any way to excuse the evil you've done or that others have done. It's to make it so that evil that you feel, that pain that you feel, doesn't become so overwhelming that it cuts you off from ever being able to make tshuva, right? And so I think what he's saying is, yeah, Jewish guilt, but Jewish guilt in its place.
Okay.
Right? At least that's what I would have to say. Yes.
The answer to this question may lead to another seminar, but is any of this foundational from Maimonides' Guide to the Perplexed? Because the title of Maimonides is all this. It's basically making you're perplexed, you're depressed. I've never read it. I don't know it, but that's why I'm asking the question.
So the Hasidim are
kind of how should I say it? A prescription.
Yes.
Basically, for those who are feeling overwhelmed by the depression.
Right. Not through Maimonides particularly, because remember, Maimonides is going to be used in opposition to the Hasidic movement. The Mitnagdim, the ones that are opposed to the Hasidim, right? Because don't forget, the Hasidim and the Mitnagdim is the great division in the 1700s, right? And the Mitnagdim are going to say, what's all this ecstatic joy baloney? Right? You need to study. You need to do the mitzvot. You need to follow Maimonides and be rational, right? Because Maimonides is at least in the minds of the Mitnagdim, is the champion for rational Judaism, right? Judaism that can be seen through the eyes of Greek philosophy, right? And as long as you study the mitzvot and you do them, who cares if you have joy or not? You do it. And the Hasidim, right, through the Baal Shem Tov said, no, you do the mitzvot, right? Don't think that they're in any way saying you don't. You do them, but there has to be this underlying foundation of ecstasy and joy and passion. You just can't do the mitzvot because they're written. You're cheating yourself out of a relationship with God if you do. So Rabbi Nachman knows Maimonides, don't get me wrong. He knows Maimonides, but the Hasidim look at Maimonides and they say, what a waste. What a waste, because all you're doing is being rational, right? And there is so much more to that, and you're missing out on the ecstasy of the divine in your life by saying all Judaism is rationality. Right. So yes, they know Maimonides, but they don't really feel that he's got the oomph. Right. And again, look at the world that the Hasidim emerge out of. So many false messiahs had led us astray by that time. We were in such a state of despair, right? Because we were dispersed, we were minority cultures, and then after Shabtai Tzvi, right, the great hope that spread across Europe, that everyone said, this is it, Mashiach is here, and boom, right, total failure, right? This is then what encouraged the Baal Shem Tov to come out of the forest, right, and say, there's another way, right? And so, so I would say, you got to study Maimonides, you got to know the mitzvot, but where's the passion? Where's the fire? Where's the joy? Where's the ecstasy? Because then you're connecting with God, right? So so that's what I would say. Yeah, no. Okay, so if someone's going to stand up there and lead prayers, okay, then they need to, right, be able to not only judge others fairly in themselves, they need to be able to find the little spark in each of the people in the sanctuary so that they can weave the melodies together of the people and be their messenger. And someone who can make the aforementioned melodies, in other words, right, he's capable of judging all people favorably, even the rabble and the wicked, because he persistently searches and seeks to find the good points in all of them, through which melodies are made, as explained above. This tzaddik, since he is on this level, is capable of being the cantor and messenger of the people. Now, I am not making a statement about my role as cantor. I want that to be very clear. I did not choose this lesson self-servingly. But in the words of Rabbi Nachman, right, the person who is capable of doing that and doing that consistently and truly can be the messenger of their congregation before God, they're the one that you make the chazan, right? And you don't make other people the chazan if they can't do this, right? That's the level someone has to be at to be the shliach tzibur or the chazan, right? That is, he can lead the communal prayers because he has within him this aspect, which is a necessary requirement to be a truly fitting messenger of the people. For he must possess the ability whereby all the good points are drawn to him and are merged within him, so that he is capable of gathering all the good points that are to be found in each Jew, even a Jewish sinner, as explained above. Right? So the prayer leader has to be able to take all of your good points and they have to be drawn in and merge within him with his good points. And then all of that becomes a divine melody that ascends to God. And that is why communal prayer is so important, because communal prayer is this process whereby the community is gathered around a focal point. All the good of everyone, no matter how small, merges and becomes a beautiful melody up to the divine. And that's how prayers ascend during the prayer service. Okay. So that's the third section. Okay. So going on from there into section 4. Okay. Now, so not only do you have the chazan and the prayer leader, but know too, that in each and every generation, there is a shepherd who is the aspect of Moses, the faithful shepherd. And this shepherd makes a sanctuary. So in every generation, Moses doesn't literally reincarnate, but there is someone who is actually considered to be the aspect of Moses. They're on such a high level, right, that they are in many ways an aspect of the great prophet, okay? And this person, because they are so exalted and so high, they're the ones who actually can truly make a sanctuary, okay? So if you make a sanctuary, right, that means that you have someone that supposedly is considered to be almost the aspect of Moses, okay? And no, the young school children receive the undefiled breath of their mouths from this sanctuary. Therefore, when a young child first begins to read and enter the study of Torah, he begins with Vayikra, and I call to Moses. The word Vayikra is written with a small aleph because the book of Vayikra speaks of the completion of the sanctuary's erection. It was then that God called to Moses and began speaking to him from the sanctuary. This is why the young children begin from there, because it is from there that they receive the breath of their mouths, as explained above. And from there, they begin to read and enter into Torah study. Okay, so you basically think of the process of what he's saying. You start by finding good in others. Then you start by finding good in yourself. And then you gather together a community and you appoint a prayer leader. And the prayer leader is able to then weave together all the good points of the community. And then that community becomes a sanctuary. And then the young children come to that sanctuary. And then you start to teach the young children. And you start them with Vayikra. Now, supposedly, and this is where I can talk to the Yiddish mavens here, supposedly, Vayikra, right? It's written with a small aleph, right? Aleph, I can't remember what the word for small is, but supposedly, but no, it's not. It's another word. Do I have the? Here. No, I'll have it here. But supposedly, because I did remember to bring the book, and supposedly, if I understand at least what the note says correctly, hold on. What's the note on? Small aleph. Here it is, 46. So it's yes. So the last letter of the word Vayikra is scripted smaller than others with an aleph ze'ira. Okay, that's the Hebrew aleph ze'ira. Okay, and in Aramaic, oh sorry, I can't. No, sorry, I thought he said Yiddish. No, and in Aramaic, aleph means to teach. Okay, sorry. So this was there's another thing for the Yiddish people. Sorry, this was Aramaic. Sorry. The word aleph means to teach, and ze'ira also connotes young. Okay, so it's an aleph ze'ira, right? Hence, that's why you begin with Vayikra, because you teach the young aleph ze'ira in Aramaic Vayikra. Okay, and so, and again, why do you teach them Vayikra? Because they're coming into the sanctuary, right? We've built a sanctuary, and now we're drawing the young children into the sanctuary, just as God drew Moses into the sanctuary in Vayikra. So therefore, it makes sense that that's where you then begin giving the breath of Torah to the young. And that's the explanation as to why, at least Rabbi Nachman's explanation, right, as to why we teach from there. Okay. And no, all the tzaddikim of the generation, without exception, are the aspect of a shepherd. So even if you don't have the tzaddik in your sanctuary, that's the true aspect of Moses, all the tzaddikim, no matter where they're over, they're all some aspect, right, of Moses, right? For within each one of them is an aspect of Moses, and each one of them in his own aspect makes an aspect of a sanctuary from which the young children receive the breath of their mouths, as explained above. And each tzaddik commensurate with this aspect, the aspect of the sanctuary he makes, likewise has young children who receive from there. Thus it is that every tzaddik of the generation, without exception, has a specific number of children who receive the breath of their mouths from him, each tzaddik commensurate with his aspect as explained above. Okay, so what you have is, right, you have this sort of pyramid scheme, I guess you could say, right? At the top, you have the true highest tzaddik of the generation, right? Now, if you're lucky, that might be the person that's leading your sanctuary, right? But if not, don't worry, because there's all these other sub-tzaddiks that are all aspects of Moses, and each one of them have their own sanctuary that is an aspect of the one that the true tzaddik is, and each one of them have children coming into them. Each one has a predetermined number of children that will come into them, and they receive instruction, right? And so it's this, right? It's this process. So by virtue of this, right, we are a sanctuary. I mean, I'd like to think that we're the top one, but maybe we're just an aspect of Moses instead of the top one. But I'd like to think we were the top one, but and we have responsibility for a certain number of children, and we have to make sure that those children are educated and that they receive the breath of Torah so that they in turn can grow up and then be part of other sanctuaries that are part of other aspects of Moses that will teach other children, right? And it's this process of how, so Maxine.
It feels like a democratization. When you started explaining it about Moshe Rabbeinu, what popped into my head was, come to Israel to Moshe. Oh,
right.
And this gets around it by going wider and assigning the responsibility across many tzaddikim and out into the community.
Right, because you can't say, I'm not the aspect of Moses, and therefore it's not my role, or I don't have the responsibility to teach. I don't have the responsibility to pass on my tradition and my faith to the next generation because, but that's just the aspect, Moses did that. Right? No, and I think you're right. I think this is a way to sort of democratize, right? Sure, there is some aspect of Moses somewhere in this generation that has the absolute perfect sanctuary, and that is right. But all of the other sanctuaries, you have your job too, right? And the reason why he's talking about this, and this is at least what some of the notes on this end of this lesson say, is because supposedly Lvov, at the time he went there, Lemberg, was one of the hot centers of the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment. And he was very concerned that the Jews in that town were turning away from teaching their children the Torah and the Jewish tradition, right? And were abandoning that to the Jewish Enlightenment, And so he taught this lesson in response to that. That, yes, there's the Enlightenment, but you still must pass on Judaism, the tradition, the Torah. You can't abandon that for the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment, and say that's okay, right? Why? Because there's an aspect of Moses in each sanctuary, and just as Moses was called, so you have to call the children. And then by calling the children, you teach them. And again, it becomes this process, right? And it is the responsibility of each and every Jewish community, each and every Jewish sanctuary to teach the children and to pass it on. But you can't teach the children if you can't build a sanctuary. And you can't build a sanctuary unless you have a prayer leader who can actually find the good in all of the people in your community and draw that in. And that person can't do that if they're not capable of judging themselves favorably. And they won't be capable of judging themselves favorably if they can't judge others favorably. Right? If we can really understand this process, this is what will draw people and children into the sanctuary. And this is what allows us to pass on our traditions from generation to generation, not giving in to despair and depression and saying that there's nothing worthy about us. There's nothing worthy about us as Jewish people. We have to be able to find that thing about us that makes us worthy. We have to be able to find that in other Jews. And I would go even farther to say just other people in the world. We have to be able to draw all of that energy in and then let the children follow that energy into our space and teach them, right? And that becomes this beautiful process by which a community doesn't give in to despair, right? Because their purpose is to be joyful and to teach the children to be joyful and to make sure that we pass on the breath of Torah. Okay? Yes.
What about Sodom and Gomorrah? Did God not find good in people that lived there?
Well, but remember, that was Abraham's fault. He didn't go far enough. He asked God to find good in 10 people. He should have gone lower. No, I mean, seriously, right? Because that was the problem. Not in the Torah, right? After 10, God and Abraham part ways, right? That's why Lot gets saved, right? Supposedly God couldn't find the 10 that Abraham asked. He should have kept bargaining, right? Because sure, God may have found, right? But ultimately, in the end, he did find the good in Lot, right? And off he went.
I thought it was just that Lot was related to Abraham.
Well, that's what the text on its face says, right? That he's rescuing him because of the relationship with Abraham. But again, remember, Abraham stopped with God at 10, a minion. And there wasn't a minion in Sodom and Gomorrah. So Abraham should have gone deeper.
Found women for the men.
Well, that too. Yes, that too. Yes. Going on, this is the aspect of what our sages of blessed memory said, right? Young children are snatched away because of the sin of the generation, as it is said, and graze your young goats by the shepherds' mishkanot, tents, right? So the young children, mitnashchin, are taken as surety for the shepherds, right? So he's playing with a verse from the Song of Songs, right? And he's saying that, right, that, why are, our children taken away? They're taken away, right, because of the fact that they don't get to graze, right? They don't get to graze by the tent of the shepherd. There's no sanctuary that truly calls them in, right? Because there's no sanctuary that is embodied in joy, right? And so they don't come in, and then as a result, they don't get a chance to graze by the shepherd's tents, right? Instead, and as a result, they are mitnashchin, they're taken, right, away from you, right, as a surety, because you don't have a shepherd, and so they're taken away, okay? When really what you want them is you want to have a sanctuary and a community based in joy, and then they will come in and be able to graze by the tents of the shepherds. And when you don't follow this, mishkanot, tents, can be then turned into mitnashchin, taken as surety, taken away, right? As so that the non-shepherds don't infect them. Yes.
So I've told you this story, but it just reminds me of the story. I brought my kids to services at school, and so they were making lots of noise, and I was shushing them and quiet. This very nice Israeli said to me, "Ali." He said, "I want to tell you about a midrash." I won't continue in the accent. He said, "I want to tell you about this midrash where this army wanted to attack the Israelites, and one of the messengers of this army said, 'Well, how do we know if we should?' He said, 'Go down and let me know if the synagogues are quiet or noise.' I said, 'Well, why? What does that matter?' He said, 'If they're quiet, then we can go and conquer them, no problem. But if they're noisy, we don't stand a chance.'" So he was basically telling me, let the kids find joy in the sanctuary, and
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the whole thing. If your community is based on this, then you will be able to actually bring the children that will be able to graze, right? That will be able to graze. And that's the whole point, right? That you have to be based in joy and ecstasy, and then the children will be based in joy and ecstasy, and that's what makes the sanctuary, right? So as it says, this is the explanation of by the shepherd's tents, right? They receive the breath of their mouths from the aspect of the mishkanot of the shepherds. They receive, right, their breath of Torah, what allows them to go out and be happy, confident Jews from the breath of the shepherd, the tent of the shepherd, the sanctuary of the shepherd, the Mishkan of the shepherd, right? Which, of course, he says is the tzaddikim of each generation who makes a Mishkan as explained above. However, to know all this, to know of each and every tzaddik, which are the young children who relate to him and how much they receive from him, and to know all the aspects involved in this and the generations that will come from them to the very end, no one who can make the aforementioned melodies can know all this. So you're not going to be able to know which children to bring in, and you're not going to be able to know which ones are yours and who you can instruct properly and who belongs with you if you're not capable of finding the good in yourself and finding the good in others and finding the good in your congregants and finding the good in other people. If you can't do that, then you're not going to even know how to bring the children in. You're not going to know which ones belong to you. You're not going to know which ones are meant for this sanctuary as opposed to other sanctuaries because there's a fit, right? Certain children belong here. Certain children belong there. Certain children belong elsewhere. It's not a one size fits all. Right? And you're never going to know that if you can't find the good. It all is based on finding the good. And that has to be the foundation of it all. Right? And this is the deeper meaning of what our sages of blessed memory said in the Mishnah. Okay. In truth, they said, and this is a quote from the Talmud, Shabbat 11a, the Chazan sees where the young children are reading. Okay. The Chazan, one who can make the aforementioned melodies, right, who's worthy of leading the prayers because they can find the good in everyone, right? He can be the cantor, right, the messenger of the people, leader of the communal prayers, as explained above. He sees and knows where the young children are reading, from which tzaddik they receive the breath of their mouths, through whom they read and enter into the study of Torah, as explained above. So supposedly, because I'm the Chazan, I know what children belong here. I know who belongs here. I know, supposedly, who belongs elsewhere. I know what will make my community happy and strong and able to transmit our joy and our Judaism to the next generation that belong to us. And whoever leads the prayers over at Hajmi knows the children that belong to them. And whoever leads the prayers over at B'nai Tikva knows the prayers that belong to them. And whoever leads over at Tehillat Shalom knows the children that belong to them. And so on and so on and so on. Right? God help me that I should know that. But whatever, but that's what he's saying, right? That if you have, right, the right tzaddik, the right leader, the one that can find the good in himself, in others, in the congregants, who can lead the prayers, that their vision can be expanded and they know how to make the community strong and happy, right? And there, because of that, that joy will flow over and the next generation will come. And then this is it, right? It says at the end, this completes volume 1. Praise to God, the last and the first. We have 1 minute before it's 5 of, 6 minutes before the service. Questions? This is a very powerful lesson. Question.
Observation. I think that it's a remarkable thing that a rabbi is acknowledging this kind of importance and respect to a cantor.
Right, or to the prayer leaders. Yeah, to the prayer leaders. Yeah.
Very often the relationship is like this.
Right. He's not claiming that this is the sole, right. But it's interesting. He's not saying that this is like the role of like the rabbis or whatever. This is the role of whoever the congregation wants to lead their prayers. Right. So, and it's the aspect of choosing the person to lead the prayers because you see within them the ability to find the good. And then that's what allows them to lead the prayers, right? And because of that, and it's all based on this ability to find the good. If you can't find the good, that's it, game over. The minute it's based on finding the good, then, right, you have this sort of ripple effect. Yes, Ari.
I have to admit, I was following along up until Leviticus, I see in Leviticus, 2:82:4:2. And where it starts going from the, it says, and he begins with Vayikra to Moshe, and he called to Moshe, the small
Right.
that was that part. Well, I looked up on Sefaria what one is, and it starts off pretty innocuous, God called to Moses and spoke to him in the
Right.
meeting. Well, but then afterwards it gets pretty brutal. So I'm thinking, is this really 1:1 and that's it? Or because there's some pretty incredible, like it talks about the burnt offering. Right next it says, when any person offering to cattle to God, you shall choose your offering from the herd or from the flock. Your offering is burnt. Talks about flaying the cattle, sectioning the cattle.
Yeah.
Putting it on the altar.
Yep.
Like, is it only 1:1?
No. So do you understand? So this is going back to the other rabbinic sages that Nachman is building on.
Yeah.
Why do you start with Vayikra, with young children? Because, and I think the teachers in this group will back me up on this, children love rules. Children love learning about what's right, what's wrong, where does this go, where does that go, right? They love learning about structure. And Vayikra is all about structure. So what do? When the child is the age that they want to learn about structure, you don't teach them stories about the flood and things like that. You teach them that when they're more able to understand things. You teach a child, right, when they want to know about structure, you teach them structure, and that's Vayikra.
But I can't help yet. I feel like there's a symbol here. You're talking about sinning and us feeling guilt, and there's like a lot of the analogy about what we do to the cattle is what we do to ourselves when we're feeling guilty. We're cracking ourselves open. I just can't. And so I was distracted for the rest of the lesson.
It's okay.
Is there a deeper connection between the two?
Well, there might be on some level. I could see that, even all the stuff that we read about in Vayikra, you have to approach it with a foundation of joy and with a foundation of ecstasy. You have to understand that for our ancestors in the temple, what they did there was an expression of ecstasy, because this was the place that God could be found.
Was the burnt offering a sin offering?
One of them is. There's tons of classifications. One of them is a sin offering, which they do talk about. Yes.
Maybe it's alleviating the things that you do yourself, put it on to me.
Could be.
Likely. Well,
Could be.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 minutes to service, everyone. I want to thank you for being a part of this. Because we finished 282, if you come on Wednesday, we're going to start his next seminal teaching, which is about hitbodedut, drawing to God, clinging to God. How does one draw close to the divine? You have to have this as your foundation. But if this is your foundation, then we can go to the next lesson, which is, how do I actually develop a personal, deep relationship with divinity? How do I engage in hitbodedut, drawing close to God? So that's where we're going to pick up with his next lesson on Wednesday. So have a great day, everyone, and services in just a minute or so.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Rook